Brother Yusuf, thank you just for your words and for reminding us and setting us in the reality that we're in right now. And I hope if there's anything that you get out of today when you leave here this Sunday, is that you tell the world, spread the word that there is no ceasefire. And there was a big question that was asked to many of us, Zionists on the internet and other pro-Israel folks, who said, where is the pro-Palestinian movement? Why are you not in the streets celebrating a ceasefire? And we as Palestinians, we've seen this movie before. And we move with extreme caution and skepticism. And it's interesting to me that someone would say, let's celebrate a ceasefire after what we have witnessed for the last 2 years. And Yusuf touched me dearly because he reminded me of the many nights, and I know many of you have seen these videos before. The genocide in Gaza is not the first genocide to ever happen in this world, but it is the first live stream genocide. Imagine being able to watch a genocide at your fingertips and watch children blown to smithereens, watch fathers pick up the body parts of their loved ones and put them in plastic bags just to give them the dignity of a burial. That's what we witnessed for 2 years. We witnessed journalists telling the stories of the Palestinian people just to watch their own family members pass them by on gurneys in hospitals. There is not a single university that stands in Gaza today, not one. Children who haven't been to school for 2 years, the continued forced starvation of the Palestinian people. And I know that there are other horrors that are happening around the world, and I wear a pin today that has the flags of Palestine, Sudan, and Congo. But what's important about what's happening in Gaza is that we are directly, forthrightly, aiding and abetting this genocide. And we have to live with that as Americans, that we are complicit in the genocide that is happening to the Palestinian people. And the Palestinian people are a faithful people. Whether they are Muslims or Christians in Gaza, they are a very faithful people. And there are many things that they have said over the last 2 years that resonate, and also are complicated for people to understand who are not people of faith. So for example, you may watch videos where people will say, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. That means Allah, which is just the Arabic word for God, is the most sufficient. So imagine people who live under a genocide, who are being bombarded every day, whose children are forcefully being starved, and somehow they still believe there's a God. And that they believe that God has a bigger plan for them. And there's a solace in being people of faith and believing that there's a bigger plan here. Maybe God is using them in some bigger purpose for world peace. And maybe they will be sacrificed. And so what they believe is that when they do lose their family members, you may think they want to see people wailing in the streets, and oftentimes you hear them say, Alhamdulillah, which means thank God. And you might say to yourself, why would you be thanking God when you just lost your 4 children? And they're thanking God because they know that their children are martyrs and are going straight to heaven. And there is a lot of solace in Islam that tells us that when our children die, that they are going to be waiting at the gates of heaven to open the doors for their parents to come. So imagine after losing a child being able to use faith and to use God to give you some peace and solace in a world that is literally trying to obliterate you. As a Palestinian American, I have lived this for 2 years thinking, does the world not see Palestinians as human beings? And the darkness that many of us have felt, feeling so helpless to be able to intervene in any way for our own people. And many of us have been to very dark places, emotionally, mentally. I mean, just imagine living through the genocide of your people every single day. And living in the country that is the most complicit in the genocide of our people. But God is great. And God, last Thursday, blessed me with a 100% fully blooded Palestinian granddaughter. And she's named after me, so if New York City thought one Linda Sarsour was trouble, now there's 2 of us out here. And it was a reminder to me that for 77 years plus, there has been a consistent campaign to erase the Palestinian people off the face of the earth. reminder that it's never going to be the case, and that new generations of Palestinians will be born, and we will exist, and one day we will live in freedom. And as Americans in this country, and I think Yusuf really spoke eloquently to this, to really start thinking about what is our role. And oftentimes we talk about peace in the Middle East, and we want to see peace in Israel and Palestine. But that's not really something we could directly do. And oftentimes people talk about the people that are there without the people that are there. And I always say to people that we gotta do what we have power over, and that is power over our own country, our own leaders here, our tax dollars here. And also to defend a democracy that people keep saying, let's save democracy. There was like millions of people out in the streets of the United States yesterday, as you all know. And I keep reminding people, and many others people have reminded folks, that unless you stop a genocide, you can't really save a democracy. Because a democracy that aids and abets a genocide is not ever going to be a true democracy. And oftentimes we look to the wrong leaders to save democracy. And in every other moment in the world, in any other place, any historic place or historic revolution, it's been the people. It's been the people. It's never been the leaders. Chuck Schumer is going to be quite fine, whether there's a Donald Trump or not a Donald Trump in the White House. We look often in the wrong places, and I keep reminding people all the time that, and this sounds like a cliche, but we really are the change that we want to see. And it's a moment that requires courage, a type of courage that is very hard to find amongst the American public. And I say that to all of you with great love, as the Quakers have been probably one of the most consistent and courageous allies of the Palestinian people. I am from a village in the West Bank called Elmira, and many of you know we have an incredible school called the Friends School. It's a Quaker school, and that has graduated some of the most brilliant Palestinians in the world. People who went on to go to Harvard and Yale and Stanford, people who are engineers and doctors, and people that are also saving the world in their own way because of the support of the Quakers. The Quakers who have joined Palestinians to olive harvest to protect them from Israeli military who harasses them, even during something as simple as the olive harvest, which is, by the way, happening right now. This is the moment for it. And just to share a little bit more personal about sometimes when people, hear from Palestinians, it's often in a very political way. I mean, I've had experiences in New York City where you're standing with a group of friends and people ask you where you're from, and they really mean where you're from. And these people say, oh, I'm from Mexico, or my family's Mexican, and someone else will say my family's Dominican, or my family's from China. And the minute the Palestinian speaks up and says my family's Palestinian, people say, oh, I didn't mean to get political. And it's like we can't even just exist just as people to say we are from this place. We are people who are, hereditary from a very long-standing group of people who call themselves Palestinians. And oftentimes the olive trees come up often. And olive trees are very, very sacred to Palestinians. And they are a reminder of our ancestors. And I remember traveling to Palestine many times as I was growing up. Many Palestinian families, and my parents had the privilege to be able to do this. I went to Palestine almost every summer growing up because my parents wanted me to be connected to my heritage, to my culture. And they wanted me to be fluent in Arabic. And I'm not only fluent in the Arabic language, I'm fluent in my colloquial dialect from the village that I am from that is very distinct to the village that I am from. And I can speak it today, and I have taught it to my Americans, third generation now, Palestinian children, and also I will teach to my granddaughter. But I remember one year I went to Palestine in 2013. And my grandfather, who is my maternal grandfather, who passed away, was just a very jolly guy growing up when I used to just adore going to Palestine and him kind of sneaking us off one by one to get us a little treat, because we were a lot. My mom had 7 kids, and that's not including his other grandkids that were already living in Palestine. So you're talking about a man with about 35 grandchildren. And so when the American grandchildren would come, he would sneak us off and try to, give us a good time. And just a lovely, wonderful human being. And so in 2013, I noticed a big change in my grandfather. My grandfather would take a lawn chair about 150 feet away from my grandparents' home in Palestine, where there was now a barbed wire fence. And my grandfather would put a lawn chair and have a little thermos that had tea in it. He would sit there for hours and hours. And my grandmother would watch him from the balcony. And one day I went to my grandmother and I said, "Why does he do that now? Why does he just sit there hours and hours at a time?" And he was no longer the grandfather that I knew. And at that time, when I went in 2013, I had my own kids that I took at that time. I had my 3 children who were all very young at that time. And my grandmother from the balcony said, "Look, beyond the fence." And in the fence, beyond the fence she's talking about is a very large settlement called Segat settlement. And they continue to expand Segat. And what happened is that my grandfather's olive trees are now on the other side of the fence. And it devastated my grandfather because those are the trees of his great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers. And it is the responsibility of every generation after to harvest those olive trees. And I remember the many times that my grandparents would ship to the United States Pepsi bottles full of olives or olive oil, and we would get to really be so connected. Just smelling the olive oil took us back to being in Palestine. And so when my grandfather lost his olive trees, it was the most devastating, and he died in a manic state of depression. And those olive trees, hopefully one day will go back to our family, and one day new generations of our family will be able to harvest them. And I say this to all of you is because oftentimes when we come to these types of places and events and we're talking about the political analysis of what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Palestine. But for 77 years, it's just been a people who just want to live in freedom. You know, oftentimes people will define Zionism to us. They impose this definition of Zionism, that Zionism is a movement for the self-determination of the Jewish people. It is about the safety and a safe and secure homeland for the Jewish people. And there is no one in Palestine that doesn't believe that Jews deserve a safe homeland. Everybody wants to live in safety. Everybody wants to live in security. And my grandmother, who was born in 1927, right, which was 21 years before the creation of the State of Israel, she's like, "What are these people talking about? We've always lived with Jews here. If there's anyone that understands coexistence between Jews, Muslims, and Christians, it is the Palestinian people. Jews have always had ties to the homeland and also lived in Palestine with us. So when they say there's been generations of hundreds and sometimes thousands of years of Jews, that is a factual statement. Those Jews, many of whom considered themselves to also be Palestinian. In fact, my grandmother said they spoke our dialect in Arabic. Our grandparents in Palestine, they never learned Hebrew or Yiddish. They spoke in Arabic, and the Jews who lived with them also spoke in Arabic to them. My grandmother tells me a story of census workers who were Jews many, many decades ago. Before the creation of the State of Israel, she remembers as a teenager them coming to their house and my grandmother inviting them in, and they're drinking tea, and then my grandfather says, "You're both gonna get fired from your job," because they spent about 3 hours just sitting around, drinking tea, talking, conversing. My grandmother sold vegetables in the market, and right across from her would be a Jewish woman who's also selling vegetables in the market. So when people try to impose on us as Palestinians that we are the ones that need to learn peace, we live peace, we know coexistence. And my question to those who are committed to this idea of a safe and secure homeland for the Jewish people, why would you accept a concept that requires taking the safety and security of another people? If I was offered pure safety and security as a Muslim American Palestinian woman in this country, but it was offered that someone else would have to be stripped of their safety and security, I wouldn't accept that kind of fake security. That is not a real type of safety and security. And when we're calling people into a place of, like, when we say from the river to the sea, people get really worked up in New York City about this. People get trauma and triggered by this idea of from the river to the sea. What do you want us to say? When we say we want freedom for the Palestinian people, we want freedom for everyone from the river to the sea, it's from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. That's why we say from the river to the sea. Imagine saying we want them just for the people who are over here in this area. Let's skip this part. Let's go to this part, because there are Palestinians from the river to the sea. Whether they're living under a military occupation on the Jordan River, whether they're living as second-class citizens, sometimes third-class citizens within the state of Israel based on Israel's nation-state laws, or they're living under a siege in an open-air prison in Gaza. So of course we're going to say from the river to the sea, because everybody deserves that type of freedom, that type of liberation. You know, when you speak to Palestinians, what do Palestinians want? Their children have dreams and aspirations just like my children do, just like I did. They want to go to college, they want to be doctors, they want to be lawyers, they want to be astronauts, they want to work in agriculture. They have dreams too. And this occupation, this siege, the 77 years has literally put Palestinians in a place where the whole world somehow is against this very small, tiny minority population in this world. Even with a genocide, the allowing of a genocide, a live stream one, to happen for 2 years is really a question of the humanity and the morality of the world that we live in. There has to be something fundamentally wrong that this continued to happen at the hands of the US, Western nations. I mean, how could it be possible that we all of the leaders couldn't stand up to one war criminal? You know, a lot of people said to me, and here in New York and beyond New York, and Aharon knows this, not only the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, it's the dehumanization for those of us who are willing to say these people are human beings and deserve to live. The censorship, the continued, like right now, just here in New York City, we are watching a front page smear campaign against a young Muslim guy, who, by the way, is going to be the mayor of New York City, whether anybody likes it or not. It's happening. It's the thing. I'm telling you, I know that this young man is going to City Hall. And he proved a very important point. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted him to be the mayor. And I hope he's a great mayor. And I hope we support him to make sure that he, fulfills his promises to New York City. But you already know they're ready to go with a brigade to make sure that he isn't the best mayor we ever had. But he already proved a good and important point that makes me very happy in a time where I haven't found much happiness, except, of course, my incredible granddaughter. He proved that everything people had said all along was wrong. That the majority of New Yorkers actually want to support a young person who says genocide is wrong. Aiding and abetting a genocide is wrong. And that we should be focusing on New Yorkers, houseless New Yorkers, people with mental health illnesses. We should be in New York here focusing on making the city affordable for us. We shouldn't make excuses that we don't have the resources, because we apparently have billions of dollars just in the last 2 years to send bombs and to do weapons deals with the state of Israel just in the last 2 years. But then we don't have a public hospital in Staten Island. Entire borough of Staten Island doesn't have a public hospital. And our kids are struggling with classroom sizes and resources in our public school system. And we keep saying we don't have the resources. They told us back in the Bernie Sanders days that we were being idealistic. That what do you mean you want access to higher education? Are you out of your mind? Look at you, you want to live in utopia. Well, in Israel, they have access to higher education. They have health care there. Why don't we have health, universal health care? Why do people in our country die? Because they don't have access to health care. Why is it that people in our country are strapped with debt because of health care? There are people in this country that die that leave behind hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt for their families. And so I'm saying to all of you today that there's a few things that we really need to be doing. Number one, we need to be very clear that there is no ceasefire. And even the day that the announcement of the ceasefire happened, which was on October 9th, by the way, which is the day my granddaughter decided to show up in the world. Even though she was due on October 31st on Halloween. But she was like, ceasefire, this might be the day. And she showed up. And all during that announcement, if you remember, Israel was bombing Lebanon. Literally, the day of October 9th, Israel was bombing Lebanon. There is no ceasefire right now. And the reason why I say that's really important, and I say this, by the way, to Palestinians and Muslim Americans as well, is because there's been something fundamentally disturbing about the Palestine issue for me as a Palestinian. I've noticed that in the at least 25 years that I've been conscious of organizing, it has required bloodshed for people to rise up for the Palestinian people, because the Palestinian people have been continuously under occupation. Gaza has had a siege for over 20 years, but it always required 2014, you remember that, 2,900 people slaughtered. Then you remember the Great Return March, where they were sniping the nurses and the journalists and the people out by the wall. For some reason, even within the communities I come from, it's like we go into a plateau until we see dead bodies piled up. There's something fundamentally spiritually wrong with anyone, with all of us, that it requires for us to see bloodshed in order for us to continue to organize. I always say to people, even I come out of the racial justice movement, and I'll kind of wrap it up with this. I come out of the racial justice movement. It shouldn't require a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor or an Eric Garner for us to kind of rise up in the streets, to demand that people be policed, and that police's job is to keep us safe and secure, not to terrorize our community. Shouldn't it be something that only happens when we see a dead body in our communities across the country? And so we hope that you leave here, number one, telling everybody that there's no ceasefire, that we are not to let up, that we're actually closer, in my opinion, to a free Palestine than we've ever been before. And I know that sounds wild after what you've witnessed for the last 2 years, but it feels close. I have watched a rising generation, and I consider Aharon part of that generation, that's saying, listen, I'm not going to be quiet. I'm going to be on the right side of history. And imagine we live in a country that criminalized young people for doing something good, for being wholesome, for being raised well. And we told them, no, we're going to arrest you, we're going to send the cops to beat you up, for saying that they believe in sanctity of life. They believe that we shouldn't be massacring people. Imagine that in this country. So there's no ceasefire. We have to organize and stay consistent and organize. And yes, being outside in a mass mobilization is very important, but that in of itself, my friends, is not enough. It's not enough. If it's not something that is disrupting the systems that are here, if it's not boycotting, if it's not putting a wrench in a system that it continues to oppress us here in this country and abroad, it's not going to work, my friends. And we, the American people, have more privilege and more resources than any other nation in the world. As a people, we should in fact be engaged in mass disruption right now for an administration that is clearly telling you we are kings, we are authoritarians, we are above the law. And if we want to save our democracy, it has to go hand in hand with saying we will not support genocide, occupation, and apartheid that we are underwriting in Gaza. Engaging in the democratic process, a lot of people have lost hope in that. And we saw that in 2024. But there are emerging candidates across this country, places like Maine, like Graham Plattner, right? People that are giving back money to AIPAC because of us, making groups like AIPAC a pariah. The narrative has shifted because you have done the work. Now people are like, oh, they're watching my money. Gotta be careful. Seth Moulton, for God's sakes, is giving money back to AIPAC. Like, we are really at a crossroads in this country, and it's a good one. Watching someone again like Zahran Mamdani kind of rise up in New York City and literally go to City Hall. Like, there is going to be a pro-boycott, divestment sanctions, pro-Palestinian, 35-year-old mayor that's going to be in New York City, my friends. And that is a reflection of not just himself, of us as a movement, of saying we are willing to take risks on people that are standing in their convictions and values. But at the same time, we also have to stay clear-eyed, because the smear campaigns against the pro-Palestinian movement, Palestinian-led organizations, against this upcoming mayor, any politician, any high-profile activist, as you've seen in the New York Post just in the last few days. Every day there's about 5 New York Post stories. I'm probably in 2 of the 5 every week. The New York Post really loves me. But for you to be able to say, we're not going to fall for this propaganda. We are going to stay the course. And we are going to win together. And I will end by saying that the thing that gets me up in the morning every day, because people always say, what gets you up in the morning? Because people like us could be sitting in bed all day and say, I gave up on this world. This world is not worthy of my time. This must just be how it is. I believe in better days to come. And of course, my granddaughter is part of that now I have a new wind in my back to make me fight even harder than I did before. But also, it's a vision that I have, that I wake up with, that one day, all of us are going to travel to a free Palestine. And we're going to spend time on the beautiful beaches of Gaza. And the only sound we will hear are the laughter of the children and the waves hitting the shore. And that is the vision that I wake up with, that I go to bed with every night. Because in order for us to believe better days to come, we have to envision. And I see a free Palestine in our lifetime. And I know that the Quakers are going to be able to say that for 77 plus years, you also believed in better days to come. Because if you didn't believe that, AFSC would not be supporting Yusuf. They would not be in Gaza right now. They would not be building schools in the West Bank. They would not be doing service programs in the West Bank, including in the village that I am from, and I've witnessed it with my own eyes. So thank you all just being who you are, for being and coming out here on a Sunday, and for making the commitment that when we walk out those doors, we're going to continue to do the work because we are not afraid, and we're going to be as resilient as the Palestinian people, because we have not experienced anywhere near the Palestinian people or those that came before us in this country. And I know people always feel down, and I'm sorry folks, nothing that's happening right now is even close to things that people and generations before us have experienced. So we gotta suck it up. We gotta put some wind in our back and keep our heads up, and we gotta do something so that when the next generation comes, they say the people that were living in 2025, in 2024, and 2026, those were some courageous people, and because of them, and because of the things that they did, I get to live not only in a truly free United States, one that stands for peace and justice and equality and compassion around the world, but also they got to witness a free Palestine.